Continuing our tour of HTML5 features, in this video we're going to be looking at the canvas element, which at its base level allows us to draw on the screen, but at its most advanced allows you to create complete 2D and 3D games that work right inside the browser. We're not going to go that far, but if you want to have a quick Google of HTML5 Canvas games or HTML5 Canvas examples, you'll see some really cool stuff. So starting at the beginning, we create a canvas with the canvas tag, as you might imagine, and then we usually give it an ID of something like my canvas, and then we're going to specify a width. Let's go for 500 and a height of, let's say, 400. There we go. Now in itself, that doesn't show us anything at all. So we might want to give it a little bit of style. For example, a border 1px solid grey, just to be sure that it's there. There it is. So to do anything with our canvas, we need JavaScript. So let's bring in a script tag, and we'll start by getting the canvas, which we'll do in the usual way, but I'll assign a variable to it so that we can access it from later on in the JavaScript much easier. So document.getElementById, my canvas, and then the first thing we need to specify is whether we're working in 2D or 3D, and we do that by creating a context. And the context is my canvas dot get context, and we want to specify 2D because we're working in 2 dimensions here. And now let's say we want to add a rectangle to this canvas. We would first specify the fill style. So we get that within the context, and that can either be a color or even a gradient or a pattern. We'll see how to do the latter later on, but for a color, I'm just going to get one from my color picker here. So let's go for a nice green and then copy that to the clipboard with the hash in front. And there we go. So that will specify the color that we're using until we change it. And then to draw our rectangle, we use the fill rect. So that will draw a filled in rectangle. And for the fill rect function, we need to specify 4 numbers. So the first 2 numbers are the coordinates of the top left of the rectangle. Now the coordinate system in our canvas starts at the top left, so this would be 0, 0, and the bottom right would then be, in my case, 500, 400, because it's 500 along and 400 down. So if we wanted to start our rectangle in the top left corner, then we would use 0, 0. And then the last 2 numbers are the width and height of the rectangle. So if we wanted to make it 100 pixels in the horizontal and 50 pixels in the vertical, then we would do it like that. Let's take a look. Super. So obviously I could change those numbers to anything I wanted. To make a rectangle anywhere on the canvas. So that's rectangles. How about lines? Lines are very easy to draw as well. We use context again. And then in this case, we move to wherever we want the line to start. So let's say we want to draw a line from the bottom left of the canvas to the top right. So what are the coordinates of the bottom left of the canvas down here? All right, hope you got it. The bottom left is 0 in the x direction and 400 down. So that's 0, 400. Then we take our context again and line 2. And this is to specify where we want the line to go to. So once again, question for you. What are the coordinates of the top right of the rectangle, of the canvas, sorry? Okay, hope you got it. They are 500 along and 0 down. So 500, 0. And then finally we have to specify to actually draw the line, and we do that using context.stroke. Okay, let's have a look. There we go. So that's drawn our line from bottom left to top right. Notice that the line is not green. That's because we've set the fill style to green, but the line doesn't have a fill style. It instead has a stroke style. So if we set that, again, we could set that to anything we liked, but I'm going to choose a color. Let's have a red for this one. There we go. And that will then change the color of our line. We can also change the thickness of the line using context.line width. And we can put that equal to whatever we like. So say 20. That'll make it pretty thick. 20 pixels thick to be precise. And there we go. So quick challenge for you then to practice this. Can you draw a 200 by 200 pixels square in the center of the canvas with a red X crisscrossing it from the top left to the bottom right and the bottom left to the top right? Go for it. Okay, hope you managed it. It's pretty straightforward. The tricky bit is just getting the maths right. So let's create a fill rectangle again. And because we want it 200 by 200 in the center here, then we need to work out what the center of the canvas is. So this is 500 pixels wide, so the center is going to be 250, half of that. And then if we want it 200 pixels wide in total, we want to go 100 that way and 100 that way. So 100 to the left of 250 is 150. And then we also want to go 100 pixels up of the center. So the height is 400, so the center is 200. So 100 pixels up from that is 100. And then we just specify the width and the height, both of which are 200. Okay, let's check that. That looks pretty good. Now let's do our line. So we'll use context.move2. And I'm going to do top left to bottom right first off. So the top left here is the same as what we had for the rectangle there. So 150, 100. Then we'll have line 2. And we want the bottom right. So that's going to be each of these plus 200. So 350, 300. Then we'll set the stroke style. To be our color, which I'll just copy again. And finally, we'll do context.stroke to draw the line. There we go. So that's the line from top left to bottom right. We also want to do bottom left to top right. We can actually do that within the same stroke here. So we can use context.move2, and then bottom left is going to be the same as top left, but 200 down. So that's 150, 300, because we add 200 to that 100 there. And then line 2, and again, that's going to be the same as the top left coordinates, but it's going to be 200 to the right. So that's 350, 150 plus 200, and then the y coordinate is the same as for the top left. All right, let's take a look. There we go. Moving swiftly on, we can also draw circles. They're pretty straightforward. So for these ones, we use context.beginPath, and then to draw our circle, we use context.arc, and then we give the coordinates of the center of the circle. So let's say we want the center of the circle to be 100, 100, so up there somewhere. Then we give the radius of the circle, which is the distance from the center to the edge. So let's say that's 50. And then to specify the amount of arc we want, we use angles, and specifically we use a measure of angles called radians. Now you're probably used to a full circle being 360 degrees. We can also break down a circle into units called radians, where instead of being 360 radians, there are 2 pi radians in a full circle. Now that might sound horrendously complicated, but it is useful in a number of situations, and it's what we need to do here. So if I want to do a full circle, I want to go from, if this is my center, I want to go round from the right all the way round from the start to the end. So the start of the circle is 0 radians, which essentially means on the right hand side there. And then remember, there are 2 pi radians in a full circle. So if I want to go all the way around, I want to end my circle at 2 times pi. And to get pi in JavaScript, we use math.pi. So feel free to listen to that explanation again, or do a quick bit of online research about pi and radians. But this will get us our full circle, and I'll do another example in a moment which should clarify it a little bit as well. And then we use context.stroke, same as before, to draw the circle. There we go. So now we've got our full circle, which is going round from there all the way round. So to clarify what's going on with these angles, let's imagine that we want to draw an arc from here on the left to here at the top. So remember, this is 0 and all the way around is 2 pi. So the starting point now is going to be halfway round. So if all the way around is 2 pi, half the way round is 1 pi. So we're going to start at just math.pi. And then the finishing point is up here, which is 3/4 of the way round. So if the full circle is 2 pi, 3/4 of it is going to be 2 pi times 3/4. So I'm just going to take my 2 pi and multiply it by 3/4. And then that will give me a quarter circle from the left to the top. All right, so now we've got rectangles, we've got lines, and we've got arcs and circles. There are 2 more things I'm going to show you here, and they are gradients and text. So to add a gradient to our canvas, we create a variable called gradient. We can call it whatever we like, but gradient makes sense. And this is going to be context.createLinearGradient. And we've got x0 and y0 there, which are the coordinates of the top left of where we want our gradient to be, and x1 and y1, the bottom right of the gradient. So I'm going to use this gradient in my square. So the top left coordinates of my square are 150 and 100. And then the bottom right coordinates are 350, 300. So that's where I want my gradient to go. Now I need to specify the colors involved in the gradient. And to do that, I add color stops to my gradient. So we have gradient dot add color stop. And this is going to be the starting color, which is going to be the color here. or the color at 0. So 0 is the top left essentially, and I can specify an HTML color code, or I could just use a word description. So we're going to have white at the top left, and then at the bottom right, this has a color stop of 1. So let's point there, and let's use the green that we had before for that. And then, as you might have guessed, instead of setting a color as our fill style, we set gradient as the fill style. So then we'll have a very nice gradient from top left to bottom right. Finally then, we'll see how to add text to our canvas. And again, this is pretty straightforward. We start off by specifying a font. So we might go for something like 20 pixels Arial. And then we use fill text. And I'm just going to use my canvas. And then we specify the bottom left coordinates of the text. So if I want it somewhere around the middle at the top there, I might specify 200, 50. And then just before we run that, we'll need to set the fill style again, because at the moment we've got it on a gradient, which is only defined in that rectangle there. So we can just update it to a fill style of, to keep things simple, black. There we go. So that's pretty much as far as we're going to go with the canvas, but I've just got a quick challenge for you. Can you make it so that the My Canvas text goes from red on the left to green on the right with a gradient? Go for it. Okay, hope you got it. So we'll need to create a new gradient. I'll call it text gradient, which as before is going to be context.create linear gradient. Now we want it to start at 200, 50. And we want it to end somewhere on the right. I'll have to guess roughly where that is. I think it's probably about 300, 50 as well. And then we need to add our color stops. So text gradient add color stop. And we want red on the left. So I'm going to go for red. And then we want yellow on the right. So we'll go for yellow there. And then we update our fill style to being text gradient. And there we go. Very stylish. All right, so there's obviously a huge amount more that you can do with Canvas. This has just been an introduction to how you can create basic shapes, gradients, and text. I do want to put that into practice though. So in the next video, we'll have a Canvas challenge in which we'll build an analog clock.